Hey, chiropractors, welcome to Modern Chiropractic Mastery with your host, Dr. Kevin Christie, where we discuss the latest in marketing, business, and professional growth with some of the leading experts in the industry. Welcome to another episode. In this one, I am interviewing Dr. Cliff Tao, and I'm excited to touch on a topic that's new to this podcast. You know, this is Modern Chiropractic Mastery, and we talk about all kinds of things: marketing, business, communications, finances, clinical, and now some radiology. Dr. Cliff Tao is a chiropractic radiologist based in Orange County, California. He specializes in the professional interpretation of spine and musculoskeletal imaging with plain film, MRI, and computed CT. Dr. Tao reads diagnostic imaging studies for a variety of doctors, including chiropractors, osteopathic physicians, and medical physicians. I asked him to come on this show because, again, it's a topic we haven't spoke a lot about. I think as a lot of evidence-informed chiropractors, we're not sure what we should do, as far as imaging, and we dive into a little bit of that. If you do have imaging, having someone that does your reads for you, what that process looks like to give you some support. I think sometimes some really good sports chiropractors would like to have x-ray, but they're worried about having to read all of them. And so docs like Cliff, he really can help fill that void for you. And we just dive into a lot of things, radiology, and we go off on some different topics around that. And it was a very good conversation. I really enjoyed it. He's done a ton for the profession. A lot of you know who he is. And he's just a valuable resource. I think that's something I got from this as well. Just extremely valuable resource. And we dive into things radiology. And if you don't have x-ray or, and you don't plan on it, we still talked about things that's going to benefit you as a practitioner. And so it was a very wide-ranging and great conversation with Dr. Cliff Tao. And here is our conversation. All right. Welcome to the episode, Cliff. I really appreciate your time. I just gave you a nice little introduction, give our audience a background, kind of an overview. But before we dive in, I'd love to hear about yourself personally and professionally, and then we'll start talking about some radiology and certain things like that.
Sure, Kevin. Thanks for having me, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's much more to say. My name is Cliff Tao. I'm been in radiology practice for I think about 19 years now. And it's in the beginning there was a little bit of a patient practice, not my own practice, but I would fill in for colleagues, friends of mine. I also taught part-time at LACC, which is just up the freeway from me. It's about 40 minutes away. So I kind of did all three for a little while. I started teaching CE early on as well, and but then now it's all full-time radiology. I don't have a patient practice. This is my office, a small 10 by 10 room in my house, and that's is where all our radiology stuff I call it kind of like the hub. Everything comes in here, we send it out, it comes back. Thankful for for being online and the internet every single day. Personally, I'm married. My wife now works from home. She's right on the other side of that door, actually. And she works for our city of Irvine, which is in Southern California. We've been married 7 or 8 years. We have a son who's 6 years old. And right now we're a little nervous. We were talking online earlier, but I never realized these things as a 6-year-old that, it's a big deal to start public school in a few weeks. So that's our big thing right now.
Oh, that's exciting. Yeah, that's a big transition. And so, thanks for hopping on the show here. I wanted to dive into this topic. I was the one who reached out to you because I was fascinated by it, especially for my audience, because I think there's a lot of information out there that they need and certain things that they may be confused about, right? And I think there's even this, maybe hindrance for some chiropractors to have x-ray on site, even though they know it would be a need for them, but they're maybe concerned about reading the images or the mistakes that can go along with that potentially. And so I wanted to dive into some of that and other topics. But before we do that, can you give us just a little bit of, where we're at in the world of chiropractic radiology as you're seeing it, some of the advancements, some of the exciting things coming, just a little bit of an overview of what's happening in that space?
Sure, Kevin. I when I first started practice, I had this. Well, I guess I didn't know, what is chiropractic radiology versus just radiology or medical radiology, and I kind of saw them as the same thing. They're just
Mhm.
pictures of people, and we take them or we order them, we look at them. But I recently did a webinar earlier this year for the WFC, and they suggested the topic of chiropractic imaging. What's unique about it, and then I started just thinking, through my own experience. It's not published anywhere, and it really is. It really is unique. For
Mhm.
better or for worse. It is unique, and so some of the things unique to chiropractic radiology is that it's a small sliver of radiology in general. Of diagnostic imaging, it's mostly X-ray, but a lot of us use other modalities, MRI, CT, what have you. It's mostly of the spine, and maybe secondarily we have joints, musculoskeletal or orthopedic imaging. But a lot of the uniqueness comes from the imaging that occurs within the chiropractic office. And probably not so much for your audience. It may be useful to know that, a lot of my practice is reading for chiropractors that are, uh, I don't want to say non-evidence based, but
Mhm.
more the vitalistic or subluxation crowd. And as you can imagine, a lot of the views they do are not standard views,
Yep.
and that's something I had to get used to. We like to have names attached to certain views, and unconventional views,
Mhm.
and typically the image quality is not on par with medical imaging, and a lot of that is due to our hardware limitations. We don't
Yep.
have the same nice big beefy X-ray machines, but a lot of it is due to operator error or unawareness as
Yep.
well. um, I don't know if this is funny to you, but it was funny slash frustrating and angry to me, and to a bunch of other DACBRs that I shared it with. But I recently got a question from one of my clients. Well, I use the term loosely. I think I might hear from him once a year or so.
Yep.
And he emailed me, Kevin, and he's like, "Hey, Doc, do you have a chart that converts MA to MAS?" And I don't know how familiar you are with X-ray, but MA is milliamperage. It's the amount of current that goes through the tube, and S is for seconds. And literally, it's just MA and seconds. It's a multiplication thing. You don't even, I mean, you could have a table, but you could just take the 1 nanosecond to multiply your MA by the time you're doing.
Mhm.
So I said that, and it was very, I guess, groundbreaking for him. And like, how, so I don't understand. How these people have survived for so long. Not everyone is like that, obviously, but
Yeah.
so that that kind of speaks a little bit into how the quality of our imaging just is not the same as maybe what we're used to seeing in hospital or
Yeah.
medical center imaging.
And it's
Uh,
tricky, obviously it's got to be tricky. Like you said, you're not getting maybe the technical skill of shooting the x-rays as it should
mhm.
be, or the equipment's old. And so you got to deal with some of those things. Now, if you have a client that you're working with and they send you reads and all that, do you guide them sometimes on maybe when imaging is indicated, or if there is a positioning issue or a technical skill issue? Do you guide them a little bit on that as well?
A little bit, yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, it's kind of like a free service
Yep.
that we provide, and mostly because I don't really know how to charge for it other than my time, and then I
Yep.
feel like, oh, they probably don't want to pay me $300 an hour for this advice. And actually, we have I don't think many people know this, but we have a rad tech that's just a friend of mine and who is very interested in chiropractic radiology. And she's offered her service, and she's an orthopedic x-ray tech that's worked, at major hospitals and stuff like that. And so a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
And she's offered her, technical advice for free.
Oh.
And so I'll recommend her to several chiropractors that I think could use a refresher on positioning or imaging. But almost every time, the chiropractor will say that they are open to it, but then there's no change in their their image quality. And I don't know if it's because they're limited by their hardware or there's some fallout with the communication with my tech or whatever.
Yeah.
So I would love it if the image quality was superb, but in my experience, it does not happen very often.
Yeah, I can see that being a problem. Before I bought my office space, I actually ran my practice out of an orthopedic group. And even before that, I ran it out of another orthopedic group, both very good size ones. And they had, great x-ray machine. They had a full-time radiology tech. It was a good setup for me too, because I would be able to have them shoot it. I would pay them X amount to do it. And it was really nice. Obviously, it's not necessarily feasible for many chiropractic practices to have that full-time rad tech, but it definitely helps. But I think, if chiropractors are going to have X-ray on site, taking that step to make sure that the hardware is good and the technical skill is good is not that hard. I know financially it can be expensive to get the digital x-ray with all the bells and whistles, but over time it's definitely going to serve you. Now, we kind of did some pre-chatting a little bit, and we talked about some of the the confidence and psychology of actually reading x-ray and how that could potentially be a hindrance for the chiropractor having x-ray on site. Even though, I work with a lot of chiropractors, they do a ton of sports injuries. They do some auto accidents. They do other types of potential trauma stuff. And so the demand for x-ray on site would be there, but they just have this kind of block of, the confidence of reading. Can you speak to that a little bit?
That's a good question. And I don't know if I have the answer. I think that is probably one thing. We were all trained in chiropractic school to read x-rays, at least, fundamentally, and, had some practice in our internship and maybe early on in an associateship or something. But I think that's one thing, that just, we don't have the confidence, and maybe, sometimes I don't even like the word confidence because that doesn't necessarily imply competence. So
that's good. Yep.
And actually, one of our older DACBRs, John Taylor, he's kind of like our grandfather, and he's like, in his experience, he says, the more confidence you have, the less competence you have. So at least in radiology interpretation. So to him, it seems like it's almost an inverse relationship, and maybe related to your years in practice. So it just, is probably a little bit concerning. But, I think another thing is just cost. I think for the typical or average chiropractor, putting an x-ray in your office, it's got to be worth it, right? You don't want it to be an expense, but that's very hard to do, I think, in an evidence-based practice, because you're not x-raying up the wazoo every, person that walks into your office. So it's hard, and especially in some states that there's, increased regulation, like in California, if you have an x-ray, there's all these tests that you have to run on it. Maybe not anymore. That was with non-digital x-ray. You had to run these daily tests on it. Gotcha. And it becomes a barrier to having the x-ray in your own office. But there are certain ways to do it. Sometimes when I consult with chiropractors who are thinking about having x-ray or they have it and they want to make it worthwhile, I almost preface by saying, well, you can't really see it as an income stream. It's more, I mean, I hate to say this, but you kind of have to think of it. I think like the vitalistic crowd,
Hmm.
they use it as a almost like an educational or marketing tool
Yeah.
to increase patient compliance. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, or not blatantly wrong, at least. you know. So
To be debated.
to be debated. Yeah. So so there's those two things, confidence
Mhm.
in reading the X-rays, the barrier in just getting the space and making it worthwhile.
Yeah.
And there was a third one I was going to mention, but now I forget what it was. Maybe it'll come back to me later.
Yeah,
But
yeah, no worries. It seems like obviously, your vitalistic crowd is probably x-raying everybody. The evidence-informed crowd, which is our audience, not
mhm,
going to be x-raying everybody. Obviously, there was the ACA guidelines that came out and supported that in a lot of ways, and obviously ruffled feathers in a lot of ways as well. But I do have a lot of clients I work with who have practices that would very much need x-ray. Again, if you run a heavy, I've got some good friends that are evidence informed practices that do mostly MVAs, right? Or work comp. And
mhm,
and so those are scenarios where, most likely you're going to want to have a good x-ray unit, and you probably will get reimbursed fair enough to where it makes sense.
mhm,
Again, I think I've got some colleagues that are really great sports chiropractors that they're becoming almost like conservative orthopedists in a sense, where they get so many new patients that come in with even semi-traumatic sports injuries. And so x-ray is great for them. They don't look at it as a moneymaker. They just look at it as a cost of doing business, or a necessity of doing business. And ultimately, it does drive business for them because they are able to see that type of patient base, right? And
right.
so there definitely is the need for evidence informed chiropractors, probably not as much for the other side. All right, Docs, here is a new opportunity for you from Darcy Sullivan of Propel. She is our SEO specialist in helping out many chiropractors with their search engine optimization and making sure Google is finding you and getting you new patients. It's amazing how many new patients chiropractors can get and are getting when they do the SEO right, and a few other things. And Darcy is offering a free SEO workshop just for chiropractors, and you can sign up for that at bit.ly/propelmcm. That is bit.ly/propelmcm, modern chiropractic marketing, right? And so check out that link. And we're going to have you go over 5 SEO secrets to owning the first page of Google without buying ads. And Darcy's going to give that free workshop, 1 hour, to really help grow your practice and start churning new patients from the ever mighty Google, which is still king in the online marketing. So check that out at bit.ly/propelmcm for the 1 hour free workshop. Hey, Doc, are you moving office spaces, or you're a startup with your own new space, or you're like me where you need renovations because it's starting to look a little worn after about 10 years like ours is? Crossfield's Chiropractic Office Design is here to elevate you wherever you're at, and they're going to help maximize your space and flow. They're going to really help attract and retain patients, and this is going to have a great ROI on your investment when you increase that patient experience. So check out Chiropractic Office Designs by Crossfields, and we have a special link for modern chiropractic marketing listeners, and that is www.chiropracticofficedesign.com/Kevin-Christie. And with that, you're going to have discounts. We're going to have direct links to a mega bundle of free resources, and you can check them out. And you can get 15 of our most popular floor plans, 5-phase checklist for a startup office, 5-point designer checklist to evaluate your current office image. And there's 30% off on all online products when you go to www.chiropracticofficedesign.com/Kevin-Christie. What are some of the things I'd love to hear, kind of some, a story or two on reads you did for chiropractors that really was like game changer? You found something, like I'd love to hear a story like that if you could.
Oh, yeah, we get them regularly. One that I just comes to my mind. It was I want to say he's in 30s or 40s. He was a teacher with elbow pain. And well, I don't remember the chiropractor. Oh, Troy.
You don't have to mention them.
Okay. Probably not, maybe. Well, he did give me permission to share the case.
Oh,
but,
there you go. Then you can do it for sure.
Branker, and that sounds terrible. I don't know my own clients' names, but not as important in radiology as it is in regular clinical chiropractic practice. But he was a teacher, but I think he taught in Mexico or something. So he must have been in a border town or something. And this patient came up to him with elbow pain, but had already seen, one or two doctors, I think medical physicians in Mexico, had an X-ray, and based off the X-ray, they said he had a tumor. And they recommended he go see a surgeon, and he didn't like that diagnosis, so he got a second opinion, and the second opinion said from another medical doctor in Mexico said, oh no, that's a benign cyst, that may or may not be causing your pain. And when he went to see Dr. Banker, he recommended he get further imaging. So he went back to Mexico and he got a CT. And then that's when I got everything. I got the X-rays and the CT scan of his elbow. And I said, well, I don't see a tumor. I don't see a cyst. I'm not sure what they're talking about, but it could be this. It's, I don't know if you're familiar with the lateral elbow. It looks like there's a teardrop shaped cyst. It's more lucent. I mean, you might even call it a pseudotumor, but it's the medial epicondyle, and it's there on almost 99% of lateral elbow X-rays. And so I think that's what they're talking about. But he did have a spur on the back of his olecranon, which correlates with the type of pain he was having, pain at end range extension. And so that, I think, is, we don't get cases like that every single day, at that complexity level, or not. I wouldn't say complexity, but kind of a drawn out and delayed diagnosis, I would think, with risk of getting surgery for something that's not really. So
you were able to make it to where he didn't have to have surgery.
Yeah, that's probably our most common scenario. Avoiding unnecessary or inappropriate surgery or other types of treatment. It's very frequent that we'll get. I don't know how often it occurs, but a lot of our requests are, here's an X-ray. I wasn't, they don't send us, all their cases. It's just, I took this X-ray. The patient may even not have symptoms in this area, but I see this finding on the X-ray. Here it is. What is this thing? And a lot of times it's, that's an anatomic variant. It may or may not be causing symptoms, but it's not a tumor, and it's not an urgent finding. But maybe you need to follow up on it just to determine whether that's something that's symptomatic. So
that makes sense. That makes sense.
My dad, I don't know if you know this, my dad is he's retired now, but he's a medical radiologist, or was a medical radiologist. Yeah. So we have, I think I was, have this gene or something. We love to just look at stuff and not talk very much. We don't like talking to people at the same time. So I remember, I think I must have been in high school or grade school, and we were just talking about what he does. And he's like, one thing stuck with me. He said, it's not that hard to find things on imaging. It's, the key is what to do with it. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. We all have the same eyes. I mean, we're all biased to some extent, and maybe some of us see more than others. But he's like, no, that's, you can see it. Or once I pointed out, anyone can see it, but the trick is just knowing what the appropriate thing to do is. So that's kind of been, in the back of my mind. And as I kind of peer through that lens,
Now, do you give, like, if chiropractors are sending you reads, do you help guide them a little bit on that? Like what you just said, it's easy to find it, but do you help give them, if you do find something, like maybe a couple next step options for them?
It's changed, Kevin. In our residency, they were very heavy on providing recommendations and further imaging, who to refer to and stuff like that. Even on our board exam, it was almost required that, every case we were tested on had to have some kind of recommendation.
Yep.
But I've peeled back a lot from that. And part of it is because I think most chiropractors will know what to do.
Yep.
And I don't want to make it sound like I don't think they know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's true. That makes sense.
So, the best case scenario is, I'm reading for a chiropractor who I know very well, and I know what they know and I know what they don't know. And I would be able to say, there's an aneurysm. You should probably do something about that.
Yeah.
But most of the time, if there's an aneurysm, I assume they're going to know what to do with it, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes, I have to be a little more suggestive. Our wording, as you know, has to be very careful. So now, I don't usually recommend too much. I mean, they can come back and say, "Oh, hey, Cliff, what is this, thing you mentioned? Do I have to do anything?" And so I, only then, I'll say, "Okay, yeah, that's actually something you should follow up on, but it's not urgent. It's not an emergency. At least, not for the patient." That's another thing I've discovered. Is it an emergency for you as a chiropractor? Okay, maybe, but for the patient, clinically, not so much. So, but you can deal with it however you see fit.
That makes sense. Now, do you get some chiropractors that send all of their reads to you, or is it just some that they have concerns, or is it a mix of both?
It's a mix of everything. I would say probably most of the chiropractors I read for are just send the ones they have concerns about, or only the personal injury or work comp cases are the ones they send. So I mean, we have I don't know, maybe 10% of our clients, I would say, just send everything routinely. And that's what I recommend if they ask me. I mean, I know it's very self-serving at the same time, but I do think it's probably the best way to go. I mean, I don't imagine everyone can afford, or it just won't work for every office. We'll read everything the same way, regardless if we get one a year from that guy who doesn't know what MAS is, or if you send us 100 a month, we read them the same way.
That makes sense. It's one of those things too where it's not as expensive. Like you don't have to go over what it costs, but it's not as expensive as someone would think. Obviously, if you're sending all of them, you hope you're getting reimbursed for that as a chiropractor. And so can you speak to a little bit of what the process is? Like if a chiropractor is interested in making sure they're doing imaging, but they want to have that security blanket of having an expert like you to back them up and give them that, competence essentially. What does it actually look like? Okay. They get the patient comes in, they take the x-ray. How does it go from there?
Sure. Yeah. So we have, well, I mean, right off the bat, I'll say that, we'll take whatever you can get to us. We'll read whatever you send us. We just may charge you a little more if it's not in the format that we like. But the gold standard in medical imaging, so worldwide medical imaging, is to have the image in this format called DICOM, and really it's just quicker for us to read it, and I think clinically it is better too, because we can easily zoom in and out. We can measure things. We can change the windowing. We can change the density and the contrast of the image very quickly. And so that's our preferred format of the image. There's also different ways to send it. And we have two different platforms that we can set them up on. And which once they're set up, it literally is, I think is like 3 or 4 mouse clicks. So it shouldn't take you more than a couple of seconds to send a patient's study over. And then we have it, assuming all goes well, we'll have it within a few minutes on our desktop. And so it's a secure, HIPAA compliant, method for sending us, very reliable. I don't want to say 100%, but it's probably about 99% uptime, keeping it running like that. So yeah, we do have, different processes just to make it easy for people to send stuff over to us. And of course, we will probably offer, well, I don't know. I don't know if I want to say this. We do offer a little discount if you do want to send, what I would say a considerable number of studies per month.
Yeah, definitely. And, I think there's a lot of chiropractors out there that would send a considerable amount. And I think it's important to have that expertise there. And again, like let's say it's private insurance or it's auto insurance. Obviously one pays more than the other typically, but do they cover, obviously they cover the act of doing the x-ray, but do they also cover the read of the x-ray in these scenarios?
Yeah, I mean, barring any, weird denials or
Correct.
stuff like that, the typical code, we don't do insurance. I think the code was 72110 or something like that for lumbar spine, 2 to 3 views.
Yeah.
If you bill that without any modifiers, then you're billing for taking and reading the X-rays, the technical and the professional component.
Yep.
So typically you get paid, I don't know, let's say 100. I don't know for. Let's not do fees. So
yeah,
so
no fees. But I just wanted to. I asked the question, kind of knowing the answer. I was like, there's that technical and professional part of it, which it does pay for it, which is good, And so it's not like, in those, obviously if it's a cash patient, then it's not going to happen. But in those scenarios, there is a code for the read component of it, so that's good.
Yeah, it's not very much in
Nope,
case
not,
you're wondering.
the
The
goal is
technical
to
component.
offset it a little bit. Again, like you said before, it's not necessarily a money maker, but it's either a cost of doing business or, like I've mentioned before, like if you've got a really good sports practice where you get a lot of sports injuries, then you may need the x-ray a little bit more than the other evidence-informed type of chiropractor that's not getting those. And so it could attract, the fact that you have that, know how to, and have the capability in your practice, you could attract quite a few more new patients because of that.
Yeah, I think so.
And so that's the marketing part of it that I like, is like, oh yeah, this is a great sports chiropractor. They've got great x-ray and they've got a great reader, Dr. Tao, a ton of competence and confidence and doing all that. My kid sprained their ankle playing soccer. I want to go over and send them to my chiropractor to get the x-ray and all that, versus, because I think a lot of times, if your patient base, knows that, then they might send to you versus to the orthopedist, right? So it could be a benefit for sure.
Yeah, I think so. People, I think generally it's just more convenient, right?
Yep.
Everything under one roof.
I own my space inside of it's like a big medical building. It's all kinds of medical providers. And we actually used to have an imaging center in here, and they had x-ray. Some of the MRI centers here don't have x-ray, but they had x-ray, and we could access their servers the way they had it set up. And so, I could send the patient across the hall for an x-ray, get it back to me and all that. And it was great. And then they moved.
Oh,
Yeah, that kind of killed that, but it was definitely useful for sure. So I just haven't,
yeah.
done a full remodel of where I would add a imaging suite in there, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. So what do you think are some of the upcoming future next few 5 years, 10 years? Like what's on the horizon as far as imaging and certain things in your world?
Well, there's a couple things. I feel like the evidence-informed crowd, there's, research or whatever you want to call it, coming out, but it's, been coming out for a couple of decades now, that is saying there's no risk, but very little risk with X-ray imaging, X-ray imaging in particular, even CT, as a higher dose. But there's particular in the, mature skeleton. So, think about your patients that are over the age of 25 or something. Yeah, I don't want to say no, but yeah, it's extremely low level of risk. And so I hope, and I know this is self-serving as well, but
No,
I
good.
hope, they use X-ray, and don't be, afraid to order X-rays because you're afraid of the increased radiation dose. And there is increased radiation dose, but it's a minimal amount of radiation, which we're getting all the time. There's terrestrial radiation, albeit being natural, cosmic radiation. If you fly, transatlantic flight, we're all getting radiation all the time. Yeah. And medical imaging, actually there was I think it was in some big, I call it a big bad report. It's like this 400-page report on the national status of radiology or radiation imaging in the US. They do it every decade or so. So it's a pretty big report. And I think we all knew this, but of all the radiation that you and I get on an annual basis, I think it's like only 20% is from medical imaging. So 80% of the ionizing radiation we get, as a population is from natural sources. Only 20% is from medical imaging purposes. And so of course that's averaged, throughout the whole population. So you kind of have to put things in perspective. So that's one thing I think, hopefully, we'll realize that it's not as big of a deal to order at least X-ray imaging. And you could kind of extrapolate that to CT as well, even though it is higher radiation dose. Generally, anything under 100 millisieverts, which is all medical imaging, is considered very safe. I mean, if you get 10 CT scans within a span of a couple of days, okay, that's probably not that safe, but hopefully have a pretty good clinical indication. The other thing is that there's new imaging modalities, well, relatively new. So even within X-ray, they have these machines that can do regular X-rays that you and I are very familiar with, but they can also do these motion or fluoro type of studies, using the same machine. But of course, they cost a little bit more. But if those are worth having for your patients, and I think that would be just another thing to have under your roof, and maybe something they can market, because I've never seen them actually in clinical use. And there's other imaging too. We recently, I think it's about 10 years now, but we started reading these scans called cone beam computed tomography, or CBCT, and they're like these little small footprint. They actually take up less square footage than an X-ray machine. They're pretty popular, or most popular, among the dentists. They use them for implant planning or whatever. Yeah. So of course, you can see the jaw, but right up there is the cervical spine, particularly the cranial-cervical junction. So and they're not super expensive to get. So, we read for quite a number of upper cervical chiropractors who actually have it in their own office. But as evidence-informed chiropractor, it'd be even beneficial, well, definitely beneficial for your patients, but even from a business standpoint, maybe to find a local dentist that has a CBCT machine and work out, I don't know, some kind of arrangement where you can send your questionable cranial cervical cases for imaging. And I like it because it's low dose, and the patient doesn't have to go to a imaging center and deal with it. It's probably going to be cash, but it's a good way to look at or get a better look at least the osseous anatomy up in that region. So maybe they'll become more in common use as the years come.
Yeah. Do you do anything with diagnostic ultrasound for like muscle tears and stuff like that?
We do. I don't personally. It's interesting. My dad, during my residency, he's in Canada, and Canada has a higher utilization rate for ultrasound. And it's a wonderful imaging technology. And he said, Cliff, you got to learn this stuff. As a chiropractor, you're going to be seeing all these soft tissue things, but no one really taught it or knew about it at the time. Of my training wasn't that long ago, but we're talking early 2000s, and I have books on it. It is still there. There's a couple books on musculoskeletal ultrasound, but just no one taught it to me, and so I had to take a couple courses myself. But it's too hard, Kevin. I couldn't learn.
I get it.
And but we have guys. We have a team of about 9 or 10, but I think about 5 of them will do musculoskeletal ultrasound.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. I think that's something too, like some sports chiropractors have looked into. I know an orthopedist that I have that I work with, he's got one. And so I'll send over to them. It hasn't because it's obviously not cheap, and you need a certain amount of utilization for it to make sense. And we just weren't there. But I could see some busy sports chiropractors utilizing it if they're dealing with a lot of muscular strains and stuff like that. So,
Yeah,
well,
we don't do a lot of them, but
yeah,
I see that as an up and coming modality as well. I think it's great. I wish I learned how to read them.
never too late, never too late. Well,
Oh boy.
Cliff, I really appreciate your time today. How can our audience reach out to you if they've got questions about this, or they're interested in setting up a situation where they're sending reads to you? I'd love for you to provide them with your information.
Oh, sure. They can email me, Cliff at clifftao.dacbr.com. They can call me 714-876-1126. I don't think there's that many Cliff Taos around. I think they could probably Google me and just
Yeah,
find out all my personal information. So
they could do that. They can do that. I'll put all that information in the show notes as well, so they'll have easy accessibility to it. So I really thank you for your time today. I really wanted to dive into this because I've had some members of our CM like asking questions about it and some of the concerns around, the competence you mentioned, right? And so this really solves a lot of that. So I thank you for your time and your competence today.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for having me. It was great to chat.
That is it for this week's episode. But before you leave, check us out at www.modernchiropracticmarketing.com for all kinds of free resources such as blogs and the podcast episodes. We've got online courses. You can check out the Chiropractic Success Academy there, which is an amazing online coaching system for you at a very affordable monthly rate. There's a free online course on the modernchiropracticmarketing.com website, so check that out. If you're interested in some one-on-one coaching, we can do that as well. We have all kinds of resources for you there, and we would also truly appreciate if you could rate and review this podcast if you're getting valuable information out of it. I can't thank you enough, and we'll see you next week.